This is the Big O Show. This is the Big O Show.
All right. There he is. How you feeling, my man? You pick up a lot of wins this weekend? Because I know you have like 146 teams.
Yeah, I got a lot that's still on the line. I love Sundays like this last one where we just get like 14, 15 straight hours of football because it starts with the London game. Like, I know not everybody loves the London game, but I love the London game because I just get like, I wake up, football is starting, and it lasts until I'm ready to go to bed. I love it. I absolutely love it. And that was a great game too.
Yeah, and the amazing thing is that the part that is not so amazing, I should say, is when you got to work the pregame for that 9:30 game, because then you're up really early to go to that show. So we did it last year. We actually were at a bar and we served breakfast instead of lunch.
Love it.
So it was actually really cool. A lot of people showed up. It was fun. So people had their pancakes and waffles and all kinds of other stuff that they were making, and so it was actually really, really cool. That's about the only thing that we made it kind of an event. You can only do this with football, dude. Only football. You can get people to go to a bar at 9:30 in the morning to go have breakfast and watch it. And wow, that game! Oh my God, they lost the stanky fingers, and that was just oh man, that was terrible to lose the stanky fingers.
I'll tell you, I do feel bad yesterday especially for the West Coast folks, maybe anybody who lives in Hawaii who didn't realize that Alvin Kamara was going to miss that game and took a fat 0 at the running back spot. I know I saw a fair number of people complaining about it in the morning. Man, you got to be aware of the London games. We got the Giants and Packers next week, and be on top of injury reports and be on top of the roster. Like, if anybody is even a little bit questionable, and that was the case with Kamara, right? I feel like we've maybe it's the fact that the NFL got rid of probable as a status, right?
Yeah,
we don't take questionable seriously anymore because too many guys who are questionable end up playing, right? Because all the probable guys get lumped into it. I get why the NFL did it. But people were getting a little too casual with Kamara. He was limited all last week in practices. Some of the buzz from the local media, from the New Orleans media, was not terribly positive on him, and he was inactive. Credit to that team for still showing up in again what was a really fun game. But that's going to be a situation we got to monitor moving forward.
What do you do with Marcus Mariota? Because he's not rostered in a lot of places, and he is producing. I don't believe in the guy whatsoever as a reality guy, but, fantasy, I guess he's kind of productive. Is that a guy that you would stash as a backup for the hell of it?
I actually feel like they got to get to Ritter at some point. And I like Mariota, especially week 1 was fun. Like, he came out and he set a career high in rushing yards. I think it was 72 yards in the opener, had a touchdown in the opener. But he's given the ball away. Not a particularly not even reaching 20.
I'm separating reality and fantasy. I'm not a reality guy with him, but I'm just wondering, there's some fantasy production there, and it's just kind of weird if anybody would, we'd go in the direction of Marcus Mariota now at this point. I'm just wondering what you think about that.
The point in his favor is he's the guy who gets to throw to Drake London and Kyle Pitts, right? And he's got some dual threat ability, and we like all those things, particularly like the rushing ability in fantasy, although he's not as proactive a runner as many of the guys. Like, he's not Jalen Hurts, obviously. He's not Lamar. Nobody's Lamar. He's not Kyler. But he's got some rushing ability. The problem really lately has been the actual attempt totals. Like, the ball's just not going in the air enough. It's going to the right guys, but they're not getting enough opportunities. It's really hard. No matter how gifted a rusher you are, it is really hard to sustain fantasy value on like 17 attempts, 20 pass attempts. Like, that just doesn't normally cut it. If we're talking about guys who are just widely available right now, I'm probably a little bit more interested in Geno Smith. Because Geno's the guy who
another one. He had a 300.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, you don't want him quarterbacking your real life team necessarily, although he's been fine. He actually leads the NFL in completion percentage right now. He's over 77%. It's just like, life is easier. Life is good when you get to throw to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. It's a good group of skill players surrounding him. He's made the most of it. It's wild that he's having the sorts of games that Russell Wilson wasn't having for the Seahawks last year. Geno running proactively a little bit. So he's been fun. He's playing well, and you love the weapons.
No doubt. All right. Brian Robinson Jr. What do we do with Brian Robinson Jr. if he's available?
Yeah, this is probably your last opportunity to act like he's still IR eligible right now. If you've got an IR spot, you want to make sure that you stash him, because I think all that buzz was real in the preseason, right? Like, I think he was definitely going to come into the season as not the total centerpiece featured runner for Washington, but he was clearly going to be the lead back or the 1A to Antonio Gibson's 1B, something like that. He was going to have a huge role. Amazingly enough, it sounds like he's gonna come back from this thing at the earliest possible timeline. So that's great news. It's gonna ding Antonio Gibson, and I think Robinson is a really interesting player. He didn't have the greatest collegiate rushing profile, I'll say that. Like, especially when you play at Alabama, the least of what you should do is rush for like 4.9 or 5 yards per carry, right? They all do better than that. Everybody who gets to run there behind those offensive linemen is generally better than that. But he had a good preseason for Washington. They obviously trust him. They were talking in the offseason about making this sort of a D'Angelo Williams, Jonathan Stewart style committee. And that was maybe the original committee for a lot of fantasy players, right? So I think we're going to get something like that. I think he needs to be rostered almost everywhere. And he's somebody who, as soon as he plays, is going to enter the flex conversation.
Chuba Hubbard was the handcuff, or is it really Donta Foreman, who did a marvelous job of filling in for Derrick Henry last year?
Yeah, in the end, Christian McCaffrey was really good and had the sort of game that basically only Christian McCaffrey can have for that team. Hubbard was fine last year, but is not a terribly exciting runner. Foreman had some really nice moments and some really good games, but Foreman also didn't like the first guy who touched Deontay Foreman almost always tackled him. So these aren't a couple of favorites of mine. I feel like the answer for fantasy managers, like if McCaffrey is to miss time at some point this season, the answer for fantasy managers is probably going to come from another team's roster.
Yep. Well, that's why I asked, because in a moment like this during this time of the week, this is where you start to look for some options out there if you're hurting at running back or if you're hurting at other positions. Wide receiver, is there one that you're looking at right now that might be a move that somebody may want to make of guys that aren't rostered that much?
Yeah, two of the most interesting guys who popped in week 4. Number one, Michael Gallup, who's available in about 60% of Yahoo leagues right now. I know it wasn't an incredible like box score performance, only caught a couple of passes. One of them did go for a touchdown, but that guy also, like, he's the 50-50 ball guy for Dallas. Like, nobody does it quite like him. He's a big play threat. We saw him draw something like, I think it was 65 yards in PI flags, like in his first game back for Dallas. And like when they had 2 receivers on the field, he was one of them. He played plenty. I think Gallup's a guy who, especially once Dak gets back, Gallup had an 1,100 yard season with Dak Prescott. Like, there's existing rapport there. That's really nice. So I think Gallup is going to be somebody that we want on rosters. And I also think that George Pickens, who kind of incredibly to me is also still available in about 60% of Yahoo leagues. I mean, that guy just looks like a star. He made a catch a week ago that is going to hold up as the catch of the year. Had some other highlight plays this past weekend, finished with 102 yards. Chase Claypool given that team almost nothing. So I really think George Pickens is somebody who, he's not a threat to Deontay Johnson exactly, but I think that team can support 2 startable fantasy receivers, and I think Pickens is going to be one of them.
All right. How do you view the Dolphins this week against the Jets? How much do their weapons get hurt? Because I kind of broke it down for everybody on Teddy Bridgewater. Teddy Bridgewater is a guy that's averaged just over a touchdown a game throughout his entire career. No matter where he's been, he got to like 1.8 or something with New Orleans, those 5 games that he started, because he had 9 touchdowns in 5 games. He does not bring any kind of explosiveness to his game. So how do you view the Miami weapons for the next week or two without Tua?
Yeah, I think maybe the biggest thing that in my view that Teddy is missing, other than, Teddy doesn't have like, push the ball 70 yards downfield sort of arm strength, but he's not, he's kind of a paint by numbers quarterback, right? He's not the most inventive quarterback, and the ceiling there is usually like 240 yards and a couple of touchdowns. I will say the receivers that Miami rolls out are unlike receivers anywhere else. Nobody else has this kind of speed in the receiving
They have
core.
the best pair in the NFL. Best pair.
Yeah,
Maybe
this is about as good as it gets.
Core, but their top two, I don't think anybody has two better than Miami right now. I don't think so.
Like there are arguments that other teams can make, but certainly nobody has this kind of shocking speed, right? So
yeah,
you might be able to bracket or find a way to cover like one guy with 4.2 speed, but two guys with 4.2 speed are an impossible problem for most NFL defenses. So, and certainly for the Jets. So I will say that Teddy hasn't been in these circumstances before. And so I think we need to think of the ceiling for virtually any Miami quarterback this season is always going to be something like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. Like, this is a really exciting receiving core. So I can see Teddy having a week. And I actually think, if you don't want to find yourself in a bidding war for the services of someone like Geno Smith, I think Teddy Bridgewater is a pretty good pivot if you need just a plug and play quarterback for a week. I think this is a good spot for him.
Drop Ayuk or Allen Robinson for Dotson?
No, I wouldn't do that. Number one, Dotson picked up a little injury this past week. We'll see what happens there. Brandon Ayuk is great. Robinson is somebody that we can begin to talk about as a drop, I think, relatively soon. We'll see how tonight goes. He hasn't seen more than 5 targets in any game, and I think he's still a good player, and it's obviously the right offense. But nobody is a player that you need to hold on to for the full season if you can't start him, right? And you're probably pretty reluctant to start Allen Robinson right now, and you can't view somebody as a full-time starter on your fantasy roster if he's only seeing 4 or 5 targets a week. Like, that's just, that's not a path to any sort of fantasy success. That's not somebody who tilts the title chase in your favor or anything like that. So I'm closer to dropping Robinson than I am Ayuk, certainly, but I wouldn't make the move with either one of them for Jahan Dotson.
Gabriel Martinez, is Alvin Kamara a buy low candidate?
Yeah. I think he pretty clearly is. It's a rib injury. This isn't a guy coming back from like, oh, he's struggling to come back from a patellar tendon or an Achilles or an ACL. It's a rib injury, and it's going to heal, and he's going to be fine. And he's probably like a week away, something like that. He may play this week. He's still Alvin Kamara. You just need to change. You need to change your expectations for how he's going to deliver his fantasy points, because certainly when Jameis is at quarterback, and I would expect Jameis to get back. By the way, that team, I believe, plays Seattle this weekend. Seattle's the team that just gave up 4 passing touchdowns to Jared Goff. They came in averaging almost 9 yards per attempt. So it's a good spot for the Saints this week. Kamara's not going to be an 80 catch guy anymore, because Jameis Winston ain't about throwing the ball to running backs. Jameis Winston is a guy who chucks it, like his average depth of target is always over 10 yards. He's generally looking downfield. Kamara was at 40 some receptions last year, and I would expect roughly the same usage this year, but he was seeing more carries. Like, there's a pretty good chance that we get into the back half of the season, and all of a sudden Alvin Kamara is seeing 20 carries a game. And he's really helping you, because that's going to be a pretty good offense. It's not an elite NFL offense, but it's pretty good. And I think the second half of the year can look great for Kamara.
I was laughing while you're answering one of the questions, because I'm reading another question. Carlos says, what the F is up with Jonathan Taylor? He's killing me.
Yeah.
Dude, they can't find a quarterback in that place. I mean, it's just, that's kind of what it is. I know, because I'm a Dolphins fan. So up until Tua, we haven't had a guy since Marino. So I know, and it's not like it's going well for Frank there. And I don't think he's a bad coach. I think Frank Reich is a hell of a coach, but I know the problem, dude. When you don't have the guy that can take the snap and you can count on him every moment of every play, that's a tough thing. And he's been put in that position now with Wentz and now with old ass Matt Ryan.
To your point, Nyheim Hines gave a great answer to the media when asked, sort of asked generally for thoughts on the Week 4 game, and he talked about how it's a different quarterback every year, right? Like, and the difficulty that creates. And he managed to not criticize his current quarterback or any past quarterback, but that's a big deal. Like, we talk about this in fantasy all the time, how the NFL is a continuity league, right? And you want to have that same cast year after year, and you want to build on the stuff that went well the year before. And you can't do that when every season it's a new, even though they're veterans, right? Like Phillip Rivers had been around the block, Carson Wentz had done some things, and Matt Ryan has certainly been around the block, played in big games, but like, you're shaking the Etch-a-Sketch every offseason, and you're building with a new guy, and it's hard. It's just really, really hard. The other issue with Jonathan Taylor right now is he came away with an ankle injury from Week 4. It might be a high ankle sprain. We're still waiting for all the details on that. And there's nobody else on that team who's anything like Jonathan Taylor. So people are going to be looking for a replacement from that. They play on Thursday night, so there's almost no chance that Taylor comes back for that. Nyheim Hines just sort of has the Nyheim Hines role and probably isn't going to be a guy that they give the ball to 25 times. Deion Jackson is one of the backups, and Philip Lindsay is on the practice squad. And there's not like easy answers there. And certainly neither one of those guys is anything like Jonathan Taylor. So that's another situation to me that is kind of like Christian McCaffrey in Carolina, where if, something happens to the guy who is the centerpiece of the offense, there's no immediate replacement for him.
All right, let's get a couple quick ones here. And this one's, this can't be real, right? Zach Wilson or Cooper Rush? No.
Good Lord.
Are you in a 20-team league?
I mean, this sort of thing happens in super flex leagues, right? If you're starting two quarterbacks,
yes, okay.
Then this is a real choice. The issue here is that Dak Prescott could come back. Like, Dak Prescott was reportedly eyeing Week 5 as a return, and if that happens, then Cooper Rush has basically no value. Rush has been good, and he's got not great but good, and he's got a very good receiving core. So if Rush were to actually play, that's where I would go. If not, Zach Wilson is kind of a low up. So you're really hoping that you get either a receiving touchdown like he just gave you, or a rushing touchdown out of Zach Wilson, because you're never going to get a blow up game from him.
All right, Zach wants to know Jared Goff or Russell Wilson this week.
Yeah, this is a tough one. And I know Jared Goff has been so good, like weirdly good, a couple of 4 touchdown games. And Jared Goff did it this week without even having, Amon-Ra St. Brown at his disposal, didn't have DJ Chark at his disposal, didn't have DeAndre Swift, still had a 4 touchdown game thanks to Seattle. He has a pretty tricky matchup with, I believe it's the Patriots coming up. And, you saw that they just, they're not quite what the Patriots defense was last year, but they just threw a good game at Aaron Rodgers, had a pick 6 against Aaron Rodgers, which when does that happen?
Their offense is just pathetic. That's all it is.
Absolutely pathetic. But that defense is kind of frisky. So I think I would steer clear of Jared Goff, at least for a week. Like, I feel better about him than I thought I would. But I would just go ahead and play Russell on Thursday night against the Colts.
Should I pick up Mike Boone with Williams' injury?
Yeah, that was really unfortunate. So Javonte Williams, we didn't talk about it earlier, came away with a knee injury from Week 4. That's rough. Mike Boone, who should be a name that's familiar to fantasy managers because he was a red hot ad in the fantasy playoffs back in 2019. He's a former preseason legend for Minnesota. And he absolutely face planted in championship week in 2019. And then the following week in week 17, when nobody has a fantasy matchup, he went off for 160 scrimmage yards. So it's probably going to be the Melvin Gordon and Mike Boone show. We don't yet know the severity of Javonte Williams' injury, but it doesn't sound like it's going to be good. So Mike Boone's going to get a decent share of the touches there. He's struggled with drops this season. He had a brutal drop in Week 4. So I wouldn't, I don't have glowing things to say about Mike Boone, but he is probably somebody who's going to fall into perhaps 15 touches a game, and that has value in fantasy. You can definitely think of him as a flex.
Pick up Mike Boone or move to Boone, North Carolina, and enjoy a little Appalachian State games as they
Why not? Why not do both? Why not do? It doesn't have to be either or.
Both? Pick up Mike Boone and then move to the beautiful area of Boone, North Carolina. Actually, Joey Vasquez says Kyle Pitts, Tyler Higbee, or Njoku at tight end.
Isn't that brutal? I would keep riding Kyle Pitts because there has to be better days ahead. He's such a gifted player. But again, we talked about it earlier. If they're only going to throw the ball like 20 times a game, it is really hard for Pitts to break out. There are going to be weeks where I feel like it's okay. My ranks may not reflect this, but I would understand if somebody wanted to start Tyler Higbee ahead of Kyle Pitts because at least Matt Stafford is going to put the ball in the air.
All right. Final question. Flex spot this week: Judy, Mostert, Edmonds, or Devontae Smith?
Well, I could filibuster about the Mostert Edmonds thing because I keep guessing it wrong. And Edmonds was fine last week because he found the end zone. But as you know,
young man, you should know your history with the Patriots and other teams when they like to use a carousel of backs.
Yeah.
Never make a decision in a carousel of backs because you will keep spinning and spinning that wheel all year long. Not a good move. The Dolphin running situation is a disaster in the sense for fantasy, not reality. Dolphin fans, relax. Okay.
Mostert was good, but all of a sudden we have Mostert playing, 72% of the snaps last week, which was the first time he'd cleared that bar this season, certainly. So he looks like he's, I don't know, but to your point,
you got to know the game plan, dude.
It could easily pivot back to Chase Edmonds. So I would play Jerry Jeudy here. I recommended Russell Wilson earlier. He was fine this past week. So I'd play Jerry Jeudy because at least we know Judy's role.
Yeah. And I was right about Russell. He went to that team is overrated, and he's going to have to be a magician if they want any chance over there. That defense is not the same it's been in the past. That's not a good situation. That's for sure. All right. Tell them about Yahoo Sports, young man, and what you're doing for fantasy players all week long.
Yeah, hey, check out the Yahoo Fantasy Football Forecast. That's the podcast that we record 5 days a week, and also Fantasy Football Live, our live video show that we run an hour before kickoff on Sundays.
And follow him on Twitter right there. But if you're listening to the podcast, you can't see it. It's at Andy Behrens. So follow him on Twitter. Andy, as always, we'll catch up next week, my friend. Have a fantastic week.
Thanks, Big O. Love chatting with you.
Thank you, my friend. It's always a pleasure. That is your Sports Grill Fantasy Football Zone.